The heirs had installed hidden cameras, hoping to catch the 67-year-old housekeeper stealing. But what the video captured caused the judge to halt the proceedings and demand absolute silence in the courtroom, because what appeared on that screen changed everything. This is a story about loyalty, about unyielding loyalty, about betrayal, the cruelest kind of betrayal, about justice or the fight for justice, and about a woman, Miss Eleanor. Ellie, to those who knew her well, who dedicated 42 years of her life to a family that ultimately tried to destroy her. If you've ever worked for someone who didn't value your effort, if you've ever been accused of something you didn't do, if you've ever felt like the world was profoundly unfair, then stay with us, because this story will remind you that the truth always finds its way. Always. Ms. Eleanor dos Santos, Ellie, was 67 years old. She was a black woman, stout, with completely white hair that she always kept pulled back in a tight bun. Her hands were wrinkled from decades of hard work. Her knees ached every morning. But her uniform was always immaculate, always pressed, always clean, because Ellie had pride, not the arrogant pride of the wealthy, the quiet pride of someone who knows they do their job well, and that they do it with heart. She had started working at the Harrison family's home when she was just 25 years old. Young, strong, newly married to a man who died 3 years later in a bus accident. No children, no family nearby, practically nothing. The Harrisons took her in. Mr. Harrison, the patriarch of the family, owned a textile mill. His wife, Mrs. Harrison, was an elegant but kind woman. They had 3 children, Fernando, the eldest, Monica, the middle child, and Lucas, the youngest. When Ellie arrived at the house, Fernando was 10 years old, Monica was 6, and Lucas hadn't even been born yet. Ellie watched those children grow up. She made them breakfast every morning. She did their laundry. She bandaged their scraped knees. She told them stories before bed when their parents were busy, which was almost always. And when Mrs. Harrison died of cancer, when Lucas was only 8 years old, it was Ellie who comforted him. It was she who held him while he cried. It was she who promised him that everything would be all right. Lucas called her Mama Ellie, in secret when no one was listening, because he knew it bothered his siblings. 42 years passed like that. 42 years of loyal service, of early mornings, of long nights, of parties prepared for people who didn't even say thank you, of Christmases spent alone in the kitchen, while the family celebrated in the dining room. Ellie never complained, never asked for more than she was given, never took anything that wasn't hers. She was an employee, but she was also family. At least, that's what she believed. Mr. Harrison grew old. At 75 years old, after a lifetime of work, he began to decline. His mind became slower, his body more fragile. He needed help with everything. His children didn't care for him. Fernando was too busy spending money he hadn't earned. Monica lived in the United States and only called once a month. Lucas visited when he could, but he had his own family, his own job, his own life. The one who cared for Mr. Harrison was Ellie. She gave him his medication. She prepared his special meals. She helped him walk when his legs failed him. She listened to him when he repeated the same stories for the 10th time. And Mr. Harrison, in his moments of clarity, would say something to Ellie that she never forgot. "Ellie, you're more family than my own children. If I could, I'd give you everything." Ellie would smile and tell him not to talk nonsense, that she was just doing her job, that she didn't need anything. But Mr. Harrison wasn't talking nonsense. He was telling the truth, and he had taken steps to prove it. 3 months before the beginning of this story, Mr. Harrison passed away. He was 82 years old. He died in his sleep, peacefully, with Ellie by his side, holding his hand. The funeral was grand, expensive. Businessmen came, politicians, important people. Fernando gave a speech about how much he loved his father. Monica flew in from the United States to cry in front of the cameras. Lucas remained silent, with red eyes, saying nothing. No one mentioned Ellie. No one thanked her for taking care of Mr. Harrison until the end. No one asked her how she was feeling. She stood in the back, invisible, as always. But everything changed a week later. At the reading of the will, Mr. Harrison's lawyer, Attorney Peterson, gathered everyone in the mansion's library. Fernando was there with his wife Patricia, a blonde woman who always looked at Ellie as if she were a piece of furniture. Monica was there, impatient, checking her watch every 5 minutes. Lucas was there, quiet, sitting in a corner, and Ellie was there too. Fernando looked at her with irritation when she entered. "What's she doing here? This is a family matter." Attorney Peterson looked at him over his glasses. "Ms. Eleanor was specifically mentioned in the will. Her presence is necessary." Fernando and Monica exchanged a look that Ellie knew well, the look of contempt they had always given her when their father wasn't looking. Attorney Peterson began to read. The first points were predictable. The main house for Fernando, the condo in the downtown for Monica, shares of the company divided among the 3 siblings, properties, investments, bank accounts. Fernando smirked. Monica nodded, satisfied. Lucas didn't change his expression. And then Attorney Peterson reached the last page. "And now, the final point of the will." He paused, looked at Ellie. "To Ms. Eleanor dos Santos, known as Ellie, who has been my companion, my caregiver, and my true family for 42 years. I leave 30% of my net worth, in addition to the downtown condo, and a lifetime pension equivalent to 3 monthly minimum wages." The silence that followed was absolute. Fernando jumped up. "What? That's impossible. My father couldn't have done that." Monica also stood up. 30%? To the housekeeper? This has to be a mistake." Attorney Peterson shook his head. "There is no mistake. This will was drafted 2 years ago, when Mr. Harrison was still in full mental capacity. It was certified by a notary, signed in front of witnesses. It is completely legal." Fernando slammed the table. "My father was senile. That woman manipulated him. She convinced him to give her our money." Ellie said nothing. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know that Mr. Harrison had done this. She hadn't asked for anything, had never expected anything, but there it was, in the will, with her name, with her inheritance. Monica pointed her finger at her. You planned it all. You wormed your way into Mr. Harrison's life. You gained his trust, and now you want to steal our inheritance." Miss Ellie finally spoke. Her voice was calm, resolute. "I planned nothing. I didn't know anything about this. I only cared for your father, and as I always have." Fernando let out a bitter laugh. "Cared for him? Right. You cared for him so well that he left you millions. How convenient." Lucas spoke up for the first time. "Enough, Fernando. Ellie cared for Dad when none of us did. When you were out spending his money, and Monica was halfway across the world, she was there." Fernando turned on his younger brother. "Of course you're defending her. You were always his favorite, his little pet." Lucas clenched his fists, but didn't respond. Attorney Peterson intervened. "Gentlemen, the will is valid. If you wish to contest it, you can do so through legal channels, but I warn you, it will be a long, expensive, and probably fruitless process." Fernando glared at Ellie with a hatred she had never seen before. "This isn't over. I won't let some housekeeper take what belongs to us." Ellie met his gaze, without fear, without resentment. "I don't want to fight with anyone, Mr. Harrison. If your father wanted to leave me something, it was his decision. I only did my job." But Fernando wasn't listening anymore. He was already plotting something, already spinning a web, and Ellie, unknowingly, was about to fall right into it. The following weeks were tense. Ellie continued to live in the mansion, legally. She had the right to stay until the inheritance process was resolved, but the atmosphere had completely changed. Fernando and Patricia moved into the house temporarily to oversee things. That was the official excuse. The reality was, they were searching for something they could use against Ellie. They followed her around the house, scrutinized her every move, interrogated her about every object she touched. "What are you doing with that box?" Patricia demanded with an accusing tone. "I'm organizing Mr. Harrison's photographs, as I always have." "And who gave you permission to touch your father-in-law's things?" Ellie took a deep breath, controlling her anger. "I've been taking care of this house for 42 years. 42 years organizing these photographs. 42 years serving this family." Patricia glared at her with contempt and left without another word. Monica called from the States every day, asking if they had found anything yet, if they had any proof, if they could prove that Ellie was a thief, because that was the plan. If they couldn't overturn the will legally, they would destroy Ellie another way. They would accuse her of theft. One night, Fernando gathered Monica via video call and Patricia in his study. Lucas wasn't invited. They knew he wouldn't cooperate. "We need evidence," Fernando said. "Evidence that that old woman has been stealing from my father for years." "And if we don't find any evidence?" Patricia asked. Fernando smiled. "Then we'll create some." Monica nodded from the screen. "We can install camera. Say we caught her stealing, her word against ours. Who's going to believe an old housekeeper over an entire family?" Fernando pulled out his phone. "I've already hired someone. They're installing the cameras tomorrow. In the hallway, in the living room, in my father's room, everywhere." "And what are we going to do with the cameras?" Patricia asked. Fernando looked at her with a smile that held no kindness. "We're going to record her stealing. Or rather, we're going to record my mother's jewelry appearing in her room. And she won't be able to explain how it got there." The plan was simple, cruel, but simple. They were going to plant jewelry in Ellie's room. They were going to record someone finding it, and then they were going to call the police, a 67-year-old housekeeper, against 3 wealthy heirs, against expensive lawyers, against a system that always favors the powerful. She didn't stand a chance, or so they thought. The next day, a technician arrived at the mansion. Fernando said it was to install a new security system. That, with his father's death, they wanted to protect the house from possible burglaries. No one could object to that. Ellie watched the technician work all morning. She saw him put small cameras in the corners of the hallway, in the living room, in the library, even near her bedroom. She said nothing. What could she say? It was their house, after all. The heirs could do what they wanted. What Ellie didn't know was that Fernando had given the technician specific instructions. "A camera in the hallway leading to her room. I want to see everything that goes in and out of there." The technician nodded without asking questions. Rich clients always had their reasons. 3 days passed. 3 days during which Fernando and Patricia watched Ellie's every move. 3 days during which they searched for the perfect moment to execute their plan. And then the moment came. It was a Wednesday evening. Ellie had gone to the drugstore to buy her blood pressure medication. Fernando knew because he had checked her schedule. At 9:15 p.m., when the house was empty, Fernando went up to the attic. There was his mother's safe, the one that contained the family jewels, pearls, diamonds, rubies, pieces worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Fernando opened the safe. He had known the combination since he was a teenager. He took a pearl necklace, diamond earrings, a gold bracelet with rubies embedded. He put them in a cloth bag and went down to Ellie's room. It was a small room, modest, a bed, a closet, a nightstand with a photograph of Mr. Harrison smiling. Fernando looked at the photograph for a moment. He felt something that might have been guilt, but he ignored it. He opened the nightstand drawer, he put the jewelry at the bottom, he covered it with old underwear, and left the room. What Fernando didn't remember, what he didn't think about in that moment of arrogance, was that the cameras he himself had installed were recording everything. Every step he took, every drawer he opened, every jewel he hid, everything was recorded. But Fernando didn't check the recordings. Why would he? He knew what he had done. He only needed the cameras for the moment of discovery, not for the moment of planting the evidence. It was a mistake, the mistake that would destroy his entire plan. 2 days later, Patricia took the first step of the show. She ran into the living room where Fernando and Monica were talking on video call. "Your mother's jewelry. It's gone. I checked the safe and it's not there." Fernando feigned surprise, feigned horror. "What? That's impossible." Monica spoke from the screen. "We need to call the police. Immediately." Fernando raised his hand. "Wait. Before we do that, let's check the security footage. If someone took them, it has to be on camera." It was all part of his plan. Review the cameras. Discover that Ms. Ellie had entered his father's room. Find out she was the only suspect. But Fernando only checked the footage from the days after he planted the jewelry. He didn't review the day of. And in those 2 days, there was nothing suspicious. Ms. Ellie was simply entering and leaving the room, cleaning, cooking, doing her normal chores. "There's nothing here," Patricia said, frustrated. Monica chimed in. "Search her room. If she took them, they have to be somewhere." Fernando nodded. "Let's go." They stormed into Ms. Ellie's room, throwing the door open without knocking, entering without permission. Ms. Ellie was in the kitchen preparing dinner, completely unaware of what was happening. Fernando yanked open the closet. Patricia searched under the bed, and then Patricia opened the nightstand drawer. "Fernando, come look at this." Fernando approached, and there it was. The pearl necklace, the diamond earrings, the ruby bracelet. Exactly where he'd placed them. Patricia screamed, loud enough for the whole house to hear. "The jewelry! It's here! The housekeeper stole them!" Miss Ellie heard the scream from the kitchen. She hurried upstairs as fast as her old knees would allow. "What's wrong? Why are you screaming?" And then she saw the scene. Fernando holding Miss Eleanor's pearl necklace, Patricia pointing at the open drawer, Monica shouting into her phone, demanding they call the police. "This was in your room," Fernando said, his voice cold. "My mother's jewelry, in your drawer." Miss Ellie shook her head. "That's impossible. I never took anything. Never." Patricia cut her off. "It's all on tape. The security cameras. We're going to watch the footage and see you stealing jewelry from a dead woman." Miss Ellie felt her world collapsing, but she didn't cry. She didn't beg. She looked Fernando directly in the eyes and said something he didn't expect. "Review all the footage from the beginning, and you'll see who really put those jewels in my room." Fernando hesitated for a moment, just a split second, but Patricia didn't notice his hesitation. She was already calling the police. 20 minutes later, 2 officers arrived at the Harrison mansion. Miss Ellie was taken to the police station in handcuffs, like a common criminal. 42 years of service, 42 years of loyalty, 42 years of early mornings and sacrifices, and it all ended like this, with her hands tied behind her back. As they shoved her into the patrol car, she saw Lucas rushing towards the door. "Wait! This is a mistake! Miss Ellie wouldn't steal anything, I know her!" Fernando stopped him. "It's too late, Lucas. The evidence is clear. You should just accept it." Lucas glared at him, his expression a mixture of disbelief and disgust. "I don't know what you and Monica did, but I know Ms. Ellie is innocent." Fernando shrugged. "A judge will decide that." The patrol car pulled away. Miss Ellie looked out the back window. She saw the mansion where she'd lived for 42 years. She saw Lucas standing at the door, his fists clenched, and she closed her eyes, because she knew the truth was on her side. She just needed to find a way to prove it. At the police station, Miss Ellie was interrogated for 4 hours. They asked her the same questions over and over. Where was the jewelry? When did she take it? Why did she hide it in her room? And she gave the same answers over and over. "I didn't take anything. I never went into the safe. Someone put those jewels in my room to frame me." The detectives didn't believe her. Why would they? She was just a housekeeper, an old woman, black, poor, against 3 wealthy heirs with expensive lawyers. The system wasn't designed to protect people like her. They left her in a cell that night, cold, damp, with a metal bunk and a thin blanket. Miss Ellie didn't sleep, but she didn't cry either. She sat on the bunk, closed her eyes, and prayed. Not for herself, not for her freedom. She prayed that the truth would come to light. The next day she was assigned a public defender. Her name was Regina Oliveira. She was young, 32 years old, short, black hair, intense eyes behind thick-rimmed glasses. She was a public defender. She had defended dozens of innocent people who couldn't afford lawyers. She had lost more cases than she had won, not because she was a bad lawyer, but because the system was designed for her to lose. But Regina never gave up. And when she saw Ms. Ellie's case, something caught her eye. 42 years working for the same family, she said, reading the file. No prior record, no complaints. And suddenly, after the employer dies and includes her in the will, jewelry appears in her room. She looked at Ms. Ellie through the glass of the visitor's room. This doesn't add up. Ms. Ellie looked back at her, her eyes tired but dignified. "Because I didn't do it, Ma'am. Someone set me up. And I'm sure it was Mr. Harrison's children." Regina nodded slowly. "They said they have security footage. Security cameras installed in the house." "Ms." Ellie remembered what she had said before she was arrested. "Tell them to review all the footage, from when they first installed the cameras, not just the last few days. All of it." Regina frowned. "Why?" "Because if someone put those jewels in my room, the cameras had to have recorded it." Regina thought for a moment. "They're right. If the cameras were active, they would have recorded everything, even whoever planted the evidence." She stood up from her chair. "I'm going to request the complete footage as part of discovery. If there's anything there, we're going to find it." Ms. Ellie looked at her with a mixture of hope and gratitude. "Thank you, ma'am, for believing me." Regina smiled slightly. "I'm not going to lie to you, Ms. Ellie. This case is going to be tough. They have money, they have lawyers, they have influence. But the truth has something that money can't buy, and we're going to use it." What Regina didn't know, what no one knew yet, was that the recordings contained exactly what they needed, and much more. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks in which Ms. Ellie remained in pre-trial detention. 3 weeks in which Fernando and Monica celebrated their anticipated victory. 3 weeks in which Lucas tried to find a way to help without knowing how. Regina worked tirelessly. She went to the Harrison mansion 3 times, demanding the complete recordings. She had to fight tooth and nail with the lawyer for the Harrison family, an arrogant guy named Dr. Mendez, who charged more per hour than Ellie made in a month. But in the end, the law was on her side. Discovery of evidence was a right. The recordings had to be turned over, and when Ellie finally received the files, when she sat in her small office to review them, she found exactly what she was looking for, and so much more than she expected. The day of the trial arrived. It was a Tuesday in October. The sky was overcast. There was a chill in the air. Miss Eleanor entered the courtroom in handcuffs. She was wearing the same clothes she'd worn on the day of her arrest. She had lost weight. There were deep circles under her eyes, but her back was straight, her head held high. She wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing her defeated. Fernando was sitting in the front row of the gallery, Patricia beside him. Monica had flown in from the States to witness what she called the end of this sham. Lucas was there too, but he sat alone, on the other side of the room, as far away from his siblings as possible. The judge entered. His name was Judge Thompson. He was 60 years old, grey hair, a serious expression. He'd presided over hundreds of cases during his career. He'd seen it all, or so he thought. because what he was about to see was going to shock him like few things ever had. Dr. Mendez spoke first. Your Honor, this is a clear case of aggravated theft. The defendant, Eleanor Smith, abused her position of trust within the Harrison family to steal jewelry of incalculable value. Jewelry that was found in her own room. We have video recordings that show she was the only one with access to that area of the house. He showed photographs of the jewelry, photographs of the drawer where they were found, photographs of Ms. Eleanor being arrested. We ask for the maximum penalty allowed by law, and we ask that any benefit the defendant may have received from the will of the late Mr. Harrison be nullified. Fernando smiled smugly from the front row. Judge Thompson nodded. Defense, your turn. Ellie stood up. She was small, young. Her suit was modest compared to Dr. Mendez's, but her voice was firm. Your Honor, the defense does not deny that the jewelry was found in my client's room. What the defense does maintain is that those jewels were planted there, intentionally, by someone who wanted to frame Miss Eleanor in order to invalidate the will that benefited her. Murmurs in the courtroom. Dr. Mendez let out a condescending laugh. How convenient. The defendant claims someone set her up. And who might that someone be? The rightful heirs. The deceased's own children. Exactly, Ellie said without flinching. Dr. Mendez stopped laughing. This is absurd. You have no proof of that. Ellie smiled. Actually, I do. She turned toward the judge. Your Honor, I request permission to present the full security camera recordings taken at the Harrison mansion. Not just the recordings the prosecution wants to show. All the recordings. From the day the cameras were installed. Dr. Mendez jumped to his feet. Objection. Those recordings are not relevant to the case. Judge Thompson looked at him coldly. And why wouldn't they be relevant if the cameras were active? Anything they recorded could be evidence. Dr. Mendez fumbled for words. It's just that the earlier recordings show nothing relevant. We've already reviewed them, Ellie interjected. Then there shouldn't be a problem showing them, right? The judge nodded. Objection overruled. You may present the recordings. Fernando felt a chill run down his spine. For the first time, he began to doubt. Ellie took out a USB drive. She handed it to the court technician. I want you to go directly to October 8th. At 9:15 p.m., main hallway camera. The technician plugged in the drive. The large screen in the courtroom lit up. And then, everyone saw. The recording showed the hallway of the mansion. Dark, silent. And then, a figure appeared. It was a man. Tall. Well-dressed. He was carrying something in his hand. A duffel bag. He walked carefully, looking around, as if he didn't want to be seen. Judge Thompson leaned forward. Stop the video. The technician paused the recording. Zoom in on the image. The technician zoomed in. The man's face became clearer. Fernando felt the world stop, because the face on the screen was his own. The judge looked at Fernando. Then he looked at the screen. Then he looked at Fernando again. Mr. Harrison, are you the man in this recording? Fernando couldn't answer. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Ellie spoke. If I may, Your Honor, I ask that the recording continue. The judge nodded. The video continued. Fernando on the screen walked towards a door. The door to Miss Eleanor's room. He opened it. He went inside. 2 minutes later, he came out, without the bag. The silence in the room was absolute. Dr. Mendez was pale. Patricia's mouth was hanging open. Monica was staring at the screen in disbelief. And Fernando was motionless, like a statue, as if his brain had shut down. Judge Thompson spoke in a grave voice. Mr. Harrison, why were you entering the defendant's room at 9 p.m.? And what were you carrying in that bag? Fernando stammered. I didn't. That's not. The recording is doctored. Ellie produced another document. Your Honor, I have here an independent forensic report certifying that the recordings have not been altered. They are authentic, without edits, without manipulations. Dr. Mendez stood up. I need a recess. I need to speak with my client. The judge looked at him sternly. Your client? You mean your accomplice, Dr. Mendez? It seems to me that you knew exactly what these recordings contained, and that's why you didn't want them presented. I didn't. I was just representing the family. I didn't know. The judge raised his hand. Silence. This hearing is officially converted into an investigation for procedural fraud and fabrication of evidence. Fernando tried to get up. He tried to run, but the court officers stopped him. No one leaves this room until I've finished watching all the recordings, the judge said, and the recordings continued. They showed Fernando opening the safe in the attic, taking out the jewels, putting them in the bag. They showed Patricia and Fernando celebrating 2 days later, minutes before reporting the jewels stolen. They showed Monica in a video call saying, "Search her room and let's get her arrested." Everything was recorded. Everything was documented. Everything was exposed. Judge Ferreira paused the video one last time. Ladies and gentlemen of the Harrison family, I must inform you that you are being formally charged with perjury, evidence tampering, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Fernando finally found his voice. This is a mistake. That housekeeper can't just take our inheritance. The judge cut him off. That housekeeper, as you call her, has just been exonerated of all charges, and you, Mr. Harrison, have just confessed your motivation. You wanted to deprive her of what is legally hers, using the police, using the judicial system, using lies. Fernando was speechless, and at that moment, a voice arose from the back of the courtroom. Your Honor, it was Lucas. He had stood up, his eyes were red, his hands were trembling. May I say something? The judge looked at him. Mr. Lucas Harrison, please proceed. Lucas walked to the front of the courtroom. He passed by his siblings without looking at them. He stopped in front of the judge. I knew Ms. Eleanor was innocent. I knew it from the beginning, but I didn't say anything. Out of fear, out of cowardice, because I didn't want to face my family. He turned toward Ms. Eleanor. Ms. Eleanor, she raised me when my mother died. She took care of me. She fed me. She comforted me when I cried. She is my mother, the only mother I ever truly had. Ms. Eleanor felt tears running down her cheeks. Lucas continued, My father loved her. He truly did. That's why he left her part of his inheritance, not because she manipulated him, but because she loved him when no one else did. She took care of him when no one else was there. He pulled an envelope from his pocket. I found this among my father's things. It's a letter he wrote a year ago. He never sent it, but I think everyone should hear it. The judge nodded. Read it. Lucas opened the envelope with trembling hands, and he read, Dearest Ellie, I know I'll never send you this letter. I'm a coward. I always have been. But I want you to know that you are the most important person in my life, more than my own children, more than anyone. You took care of me when no one else would. You listened to me when no one else had patience. You were my family when my own blood abandoned me. That's why I'm leaving you what I'm leaving you, not because you deserve it, but because it's the least I can do for everything you've given me. Thank you, Ellie, for everything. With love. Harrison. And the silence that followed was the deepest that courtroom had ever known. Miss Eleanor was crying. Regina was crying. Even the judge seemed moved. Fernando stared at the floor. Patricia had her face covered with her hands. Monica had stopped pretending that everything was all right, and Lucas walked toward Miss Eleanor. He hugged her. He hugged her like he did when he was a child, when she was all he had. Forgive me, he said through tears. Forgive me for not speaking up sooner. Miss Eleanor stroked his head. There's nothing to forgive, honey. You're here now. That's what matters. Judge Ferreira waited for the moment to pass. Then he spoke. In my 30 years as a judge, I've seen a lot of things. I've seen horrible crimes. I've seen devastating injustices. I've seen innocents convicted and guilty people go free, but I have never seen anything like this." He looked at Fernando, Patricia, and Monica. "You had everything, money, position, privilege, and you used all of that to destroy a woman who dedicated her life to taking care of your family, a woman who never harmed you, a woman who only wanted to serve." Fernando tried to speak. "Your Honor, I only—" "Silence. I'm not finished," the judge continued. "Mr. Harrison decided to recognize Ms. Eleanor in his will. It was his right. It was his money. And you, instead of respecting your father's wishes, decided to destroy an innocent elderly woman. You planted evidence. You fabricated a crime. You had her arrested. You made her spend weeks in prison. For money." He leaned back in his chair. "This isn't just a crime against Ms. Eleanor. It's a crime against justice, against the system that you manipulated for your own ends." He picked up a document. "Fernando Harrison, Patricia Harrison, and Monica Harrison, you are formally charged with perjury, evidence tampering, conspiracy to commit fraud, and infliction of emotional distress. Your passports will be confiscated. You are under house arrest until the investigation is complete." Fernando collapsed in his chair. "And as for Ms. Eleanor Santos, you are free of all charges, immediately, with a formal apology from the state for the wrongful detention you suffered." The officers removed Ms. Eleanor's handcuffs. She rubbed her wrists. She looked at the judge. "Thank you, Your Honor, and for hearing the truth." The judge nodded. "Ms. Eleanor, you deserve more than thanks. You deserve justice, and you will have it." The trial took 3 more months. 3 months during which Fernando, Patricia, and Monica faced the reality of their actions. Dr. Mendez was investigated for complicity. He lost his license to practice. Fernando was sentenced to 3 years in prison for evidence tampering and perjury. Patricia received 2 years of probation. Monica was sentenced to pay a multi-million-dollar fine and was banned from entering the country for 5 years. Mr. Harrison's will was confirmed in its entirety. Ms. Eleanor received 30% of the estate, the downtown condo, the lifetime pension. But that wasn't all. Judge Ferreira ordered additional compensation for emotional distress, $300,000, paid by Fernando and Monica from their own pockets. It was money Ms. Eleanor had never imagined having, money she had never asked for, money that would change her life. But what really changed her life wasn't the money. It was Lucas. After the trial, Lucas took her to a diner near the courthouse. They sat at a table by the window. They ordered coffee and donuts, like in the old days. "Ms. Eleanor," Lucas said softly, "I want to ask you something." "What is it, honey?" "I want you to come live with me at my house." "With my family?" Ms. Eleanor looked at him in surprise. "Lucas, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to. You raised me. You are my mother. And I want you to meet my kids, to be their grandmother, to have the family you deserve." Miss Eleanor felt her eyes welling up with tears. "But your wife, what will she say?" Lucas smiled. "Sarah agrees. In fact, it was her idea. She said she wants to meet the woman who made me the person I am." Ms. Eleanor couldn't hold back the tears. "All my life, I took care of other people's families. I cooked for other people's children. I cleaned other people's houses. And I always thought I'd never have my own family, that I would die alone." Lucas took her hand. "You're not alone anymore, Mom Ellie. Never again." They embraced in that cafe. 2 people united, not by blood, but by something deeper, by love, by gratitude, by 42 years of mutual care. 6 months later, Miss Eleanor moved into Lucas's house. It was a modest home, 3 bedrooms, a small yard, nothing compared to the Harrison mansion. But it had something the mansion never did. It had warmth, it had laughter, it had love. Lucas's children, a 7-year-old girl and a 4-year-old boy, immediately adopted her. They called her Grandma Ellie. They asked her to tell them stories before bed. They brought her drawings they made at school. They hugged her every morning. Miss Eleanor had never been so happy. Lucas's wife, Emily, turned out to be exactly as Lucas had described, kind, generous, without any prejudice. "I'll never be able to thank you for what you did for Lucas," she said one night while they were preparing dinner together. "He tells me how you took care of him when his mother died, how you comforted him, how you loved him. You're more of a mother to him than anyone else could ever be." Ms. Eleanor smiled. "I only did what anyone would do." Emily shook her head. "No, anyone wouldn't do that. That's what makes you special. And the money." Ms. Eleanor thought long and hard about what to do with the money. She could have spent it on herself, on luxuries, on trips, on things she could never have before. But that wasn't her. She used some to help Lucas pay off the mortgage on his house. She used another part to establish an education fund for her grandchildren. And with the rest, she did something no one expected. She founded an organization. It was called Ellie's House. It was a shelter and support center for domestic workers, a place where they could receive free legal advice, where they could learn about their rights, where they could find a community. Because if Ms. Eleanor had learned anything from this experience, it was that domestic workers were invisible. They worked in silence, they suffered in silence. And when something bad happened to them, no one listened. Ellie's House would change that. In its first year, they helped over 150 women who had been mistreated, exploited, unjustly accused, women who had no one else. Ms. Eleanor spent 3 days a week at the center. She spoke with the women who arrived. She told them her story. She told them they were not alone, and they listened to her, because Ms. Eleanor wasn't a lawyer speaking from a podium. She was one of them, a maid who had worked for 42 years, a woman who had been accused, arrested, humiliated, and who had survived. "If I could do it, so can you," she would tell them. "The truth always comes to light. You just have to be patient." And Fernando and Patricia and Monica. Fernando served 2 years of his sentence before being released for good behavior. He left prison a different man. Not better, just quieter, more ashamed. He moved to another city. No one heard from him again. Patricia divorced Fernando while he was in prison. She returned to her parents' house. She never mentioned the Harrisons again. And Monica stayed in the United States. She built a new life far from the scandal. She changed her last name, erased her past. The Harrison name, which was once synonymous with success and wealth, was now synonymous with shame. And Dr. Mendez, the arrogant attorney who had represented the heirs, lost everything: his license, his reputation, his clients. He ended up working as a legal assistant in a small firm, charging by the hour what he used to charge by the minute. Karma has its own way of balancing things out. Today, as I write this story, Ms. Eleanor is 70 years old. She lives with Lucas, Emily, and her 2 grandchildren in a house she can finally call her own. She cooks breakfast every morning, not because she has to, but because she enjoys it. She tends the garden, reads stories to her grandchildren, watches soap operas in the afternoons. She is happy for the first time in 70 years. She is completely happy. When I asked her what the biggest lesson she learned from all of this was, she was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled with that wise smile that only elderly people have. "I learned that the truth is patient," she told me. "It may take a while. It may seem like it's never going to come, but it always does. And when it comes, nothing can stop it." She took a sip of her coffee. "I also learned that family isn't just blood. Family is who takes care of you, who loves you, who is there when you need them. I took care of those children for 42 years. I thought they were my family, but 2 of them tried to destroy me. And Lucas, the one I least expected, was the one who saved me." Her eyes filled with tears. "And now I have a real family, grandchildren who love me, A son who chose me, a home where I belong. It took 70 years to arrive, but it arrived. If you're listening to this story, if you've made it this far, I want you to remember something. Injustice exists. Evil exists. There are people in the world who will try to destroy you for money, for power, for pure cruelty, but the truth also exists, and the truth is stronger than any lie. The heirs installed cameras to catch a maid stealing. What the cameras captured was their own betrayal. The video that was supposed to destroy Miss Eleanor saved her. The plan that was supposed to take everything from her gave her more than she ever imagined. And the woman who spent 42 years being invisible was finally seen by a judge who heard the truth, by an attorney who believed in her, by a son who chose her as his mother, by a family who welcomed her as their own. Karma exists. Justice exists. And the truth always finds its way into the light. This story is the proof.